For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. I want you to imagine that this happens at the 2024 NFL Draft in 2 weeks, if you're watching as of this video. This man right here is CJ Stroud, and he is the starting quarterback for the Houston Texans. Obviously, he's really, really good, and is the franchise quarterback down there. He made the Pro Bowl, got some votes for MVP, was named the AP Offensive Rookie of the Year in a near-unanimous vote, led the NFL in passing yards per game, and helped guide the Texans completely out of nowhere to the playoffs and a division title, where they made it all the way to the divisional round. If there is one position at the NFL Draft that the Texans very clearly do not need, it's a quarterback. But now, I want you to imagine that the Texans, for some reason, in the second round, decide to take this guy right here, Western Kentucky quarterback Austin Reed. You would look at that pick by the Texans as one of the dumbest picks of all time. You're telling me that not only did the Texans draft a guy in round 2 that was projected by just about everyone to go undrafted, but they drafted a guy at the quarterback position? How would that make any sense? You'd look at their front office as though it had 5 heads. Well, I bring that up because at the 1999 NFL Draft, that's exactly what the Indianapolis Colts did with this man right here, New Mexico quarterback Graham Leigh, in a move that made no sense whatsoever and left everyone panicking and scratching their heads. Because in the second round of the draft, the Indianapolis Colts, despite having just drafted Peyton Manning the year before, thought that it would be a good idea to draft another quarterback and draft a guy super early on, doing so on a guy that was projected by many outlets to go undrafted. But you might be asking yourself, if they did this, and this was a quarter century ago, and I was alive for that, why don't I remember it? Why don't I remember the Colts foolishly wasting a draft pick on a projected undrafted quarterback in round 2 with Peyton Manning on the roster? Well, there's a reason for that. Because this is the story behind one of the craziest controversies in the history of the NFL Draft, and the selection at the 1999 NFL Draft that threw everyone for a loop. Before I talk about the actual selection in question, the player that the Colts chose, and why the picks seem to make no sense at all on the surface, we need some context to understand what the Colts were dealing with heading into the 1999 season. In 1998, the Indianapolis Colts were not a very good football team. They finished this season with a 3-13 record, tied with the Cincinnati Bengals and the Philadelphia Eagles for the worst record in all of football. They had an abysmal defense, with the team allowing 444 points over the course of the 16-game season, or 27.8 points per game. This was the second worst total in the league, with the Cincinnati Bengals being the only team worse than them in that department. They had no run defense to speak of, allowing more yards per carry than any team in football, and they had a super inconsistent running game, which ranked 5th from the bottom of the league in rushing yards. There was a lot to not like about this team, and there was a lot that went wrong. Having said that, if there was one bright spot, and if there was one thing that gave Colts fans a ton of hope going into 1999, it was the play of the rookie quarterback, as in, the man you've been watching this whole time, Peyton Manning. You may have heard of him before. The Colts drafted the Tennessee quarterback first overall at the 1998 NFL Draft, as he was heralded by many as the best quarterback prospect since John Elway, or at the very least, Vinny Testaverde more than a decade ago. And he did not disappoint, as Manning threw 26 touchdown passes, which was a record at the time for most touchdowns thrown by a rookie. Manning finished second in the voting for AP Offensive Rookie of the Year, only behind Vikings wide receiver Randy Moss, who had maybe the greatest season by any rookie of all time. And you could tell right away that the Colts absolutely made the right decision choosing Manning over Ryan Leaf. By the time the 1998 season ended, Manning's 3,739 yards ranked 3rd in the league, only behind Brett Favre and Steve Young, and his 26 touchdowns ranked 5th in the league. You could tell that Manning was going to be a problem in Indianapolis for a long time, especially because he played every snap and had no injury history whatsoever. Basically, if there was any position that the Colts did not need to draft whatsoever, it was quarterback. Which is why it threw everyone for a loop when the Colts were on the clock in the second round with pick number 36. And when they turned in their draft card, they turned it in with this man right here on it. New Mexico quarterback Graham Leigh. Now, don't get me wrong, Graham Leigh was a pretty good quarterback in college. In 1997, as the starting quarterback for the Lobos, Leigh was so good that he helped guide the team to a 9-4 record and its first appearance in the bowl game since all the way back in 1961. In 1997, Leigh threw 24 touchdown passes, which was the most in the Western Athletic Conference, making him the first quarterback since Steve Meyer all the way back in 1975 to accomplish this feat. He followed that up in 1998 by also leading the conference with 18 touchdown passes, making him the first and only quarterback in school history to lead the WAC in this category twice. Leigh could run the option if you needed him to, or he could throw the ball deep, as New Mexico had a top 25 offense in 1997 due to how many passes of 20-plus yards Leigh completed. Not only did Leigh lead the WAC in total yards in 1997 and 1998, and not only did he finish second in the conference in passing yards in both of those seasons, but for his efforts in 1997, he was named the WAC Offensive Player of the Year. Oddly enough, this is not even the first time this week I've done a video about a quarterback draft prospect winning WAC Offensive Player of the Year, as if you want to learn more about Todd Santos, the San Diego State quarterback who won the award in 1987, you can do so by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And yes, Leigh definitely regressed a bit in 1998, as he was way more turnover prone, throwing 17 interceptions compared to 8 in 1997, and New Mexico was not as good in 1998 as a result. But people still had Leigh, at the very least, getting a shot in the NFL on some roster. But in the second round, no one saw him going that high. No one in their right mind saw him going that high. Mel Kiper Jr. had him as the 18th best quarterback on the board. Another scouting publication, Our Labs, had him as the 16th best quarterback on the board. The War Room is a draft service based out of Phoenix, and they had Leigh as the 12th best quarterback on the board. The Sporting News had Leigh as the 12th best quarterback on the board. The National Post had him as the 13th best quarterback on the board. The Winston-Salem Journal had him as the 14th best quarterback on the board. You get the idea. No publication that I could find had Leigh as one of the top 10 quarterbacks on the board. So for this man right here, as he go in the second round, when he was projected by just about everyone, in the absolute best case scenario, to be a 5th round pick, that seems absolutely preposterous and insane. And making things even crazier was the team in question that was drafting him, the Indianapolis Colts. Leigh did meet with some teams during the pre-draft process, including Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Washington, and Atlanta, but Indianapolis was not one of them. And the Colts had no reason to take a quarterback, at least not this high. How on earth did the Colts get any better with these first 2 picks? You trade Marshall Faulk, one of the best running backs in the sport, and an AP second-team All-Pro and a Pro Bowler for you last year, and with those picks that you got, you decide to take a running back in Edgerrin James, who you hope can be as good as Faulk, and a quarterback who you hope never has to play for you? You somehow got worse during the draft. You didn't upgrade the defense, you downgraded at running back, and you reached barely on a quarterback in the second round when you had no need to take one, and when you didn't even meet with him, so you didn't get to see his arm in person. And when I say that there was so much confusion about this pick that no one knew what to think of it, I mean it. ESPN reporter Sean Salisbury had this to say before the Colts made their selection. So imagine how he and everyone else watching must have felt when they did the exact opposite and reached on a backup quarterback.
In Indianapolis, the Colts pass on Ricky Williams, take the Miami Hurricane running back Edgerrin James, love his versatility, say he's got magic. As they prepare to make their second-round choice, look for them to go secondary or linebacker. Gave up too many leads in the second half last year. They need defense.
One local Indianapolis reporter had to double-check to make sure what he was seeing was correct, and that the Colts actually just chose a quarterback. All he could say was, quite simply, "I didn't expect that." But you know this was legit. It's right there on the screen. Colts take New Mexico quarterback Graham Leigh. It's real. It's legit. It's 100% there, and it's a really stupid draft pick, but it's the bet that Indianapolis had made for itself by taking a projected undrafted quarterback in the second round to back up Peyton Manning. Except, there was just one small problem with all of this. There was just one teeny tiny problem that you might have realized if you know your Colts history, or your draft history, or anything along those lines. Yeah, this never happened. The Colts used their second round pick on Florida linebacker Mike Peterson, who would have an incredibly successful career in the NFL, playing 14 seasons in the league, and possibly going on to become the most underrated player in the history of the Jacksonville Jaguars during the mid-2000s. Sean Salisbury wasn't talking out of his butt. He expected the Colts to go defense, and they went defense, getting an awfully good linebacker in the process. They did not take a quarterback. ESPN, somehow, showed the wrong guy. And it makes no sense how they show the wrong guy when you come to think of it. It'd be one thing if Mike Peterson and Graham Leigh played the same position, so the names are sorted right next to each other, and the person in charge of running the ticker just clicked on the wrong one. But nope, Peterson plays linebacker, and Leigh plays quarterback. It'd be one thing if Mike Peterson and Graham Leigh had similar last names, so the person running the ticker just had fat fingers and clicked the name underneath or above Peterson. But nope, L and P are not exactly near each other in the alphabet when you consider all the eligible draft prospects. And it'd be one thing if the players were sorted by school, and Florida and New Mexico were close to each other in the alphabet, so you had the error occur there as a result. But nope, F and N are not near each other in the alphabet. Somehow, ESPN said that Graham Leigh, despite not playing the same position as Mike Peterson, despite not having an even remotely similar name as Mike Peterson, and despite not going to a remotely similar school as Mike Peterson, got drafted by the Colts, and said the Colts used their second round pick on a backup quarterback. And what's even more insane is that ESPN didn't even issue a retraction. No apology, no nothing, none whatsoever. If you were watching the 1999 NFL Draft on TV, this is what you saw in real time after the ticker showed that Graham Leigh was the Colts' second round pick.
Gary Gardner, an inside linebacker from Northwestern. Andy Reid wants smart guys, he wants character guys. This guy, Gardner, scored a 35, very impressive 35 on the Wonderlic test. This is Andy Reid's type of guy, quarterback on each side of the football, leader on and off the field. Chris?
Mort, thank you. The second round rolls on. When we come back and visit with the commissioner, Paul Tagliabue. Second round coverage on ESPN. Stick around.
Stay with.
That's right. No word from Chris Berman saying that there was a mistake. No apology. They just cut straight to commercial. So if you were a Colts fan and were watching the draft, you had every reason to believe that ESPN was telling the truth, and that your team used its second round pick on Graham Leigh, even though they didn't. Only way after the fact, and only after Salisbury interviewed general manager Bill Polian a solid 15 minutes later, did Colt fans realize, wait a second, someone screwed up big time. We got Mike Peterson. We didn't draft a quarterback. I can breathe easy now. This is actually a pretty good pick. Said Polian on the blunder, I have a hard enough time picking the players. Maybe Mel Kiper did it. But for Graham Leigh, he'd have to wait a lot longer to hear his name called. This was a false alarm. And by a lot longer, I mean never. Because Leigh didn't end up getting drafted. There were 13 quarterbacks taken in the 1999 NFL Draft, including Joe Germain in round 4 by the St. Louis Rams, who you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But none of those guys were Graham Leigh. Despite the fact that Leigh saw his name on the ticker, and despite the fact that he thought his dreams of playing in the NFL were about to be officially realized, it was all for naught, because ESPN screwed up big time. Leigh ended up signing with the Arizona Cardinals as an undrafted free agent, but never made it onto the active roster for the team, and never played a single down in the NFL, although he did play in 2001 with the Birmingham Thunderbolts of the XFL. Granted, he was absolutely terrible there, completing just 45% of his passes while throwing 1 touchdown and 6 interceptions with a passer rating of 39, which is worse if he did nothing but spike the ball to the ground on every single play. So maybe these general managers knew what they were doing by not drafting Leigh and by not wasting precious draft capital, let alone a second-round pick, on the man. But still, what happened here was wrong. It was inexcusable. Plain and simple, it was wrong and inexcusable. Before going any further, I just want to apologize in advance. My voice usually does not sound like this, but I am recording this with a 103-degree fever. Just gotta power through as best we can going into draft season. Having said that, what's crazy about this situation, if it wasn't crazy enough as it was the fact that this was not the first time that this happened with ESPN. At the 1996 NFL Draft, the Green Bay Packers spent their 3rd-round pick on defensive back Tyrone Williams. However, if you were watching the draft, you didn't see that. You saw the Packers spend their 3rd-round pick on Stanford quarterback Mark Butterfield. Butterfield never ended up getting drafted. ESPN completely botched the name, but Butterfield was the selection according to ESPN. And you can learn more about that by clicking the card in the upper right corner. So this happened multiple times in a 4-year stretch for ESPN, where they completely got the name of the prospect wrong. Really, at the end of the day, for the draft, you have one job: get the prospects right. How do you screw that up? Seriously, how the heck do you screw that up? I guess the takeaway from this is that when you're watching the NFL Draft, do not believe anything you see. Unless the player is walking up on stage, or unless the commissioner himself or someone else is announcing the pick, if you just see the draft pick appear on the bottom line and appear on that ticker, it might not be real. It could be, but it could also just as easily not be if ESPN's history is anything to go off of. Because when it came to the debacle involving the man you've been watching this whole time, New Mexico quarterback Graham Leigh in 1999, the initial reaction by Colt fans across the country when they saw that name, Graham Leigh, pop up on their screen was, "You've got to be kidding, Leigh." Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.